Hello, Professor Franz. Welcome back to our study of the history of light as we begin part 2 concerning a small light for indoors, the candle. Candles were used by the ancient Romans from the 5th or 6th centuries BC. Our word candle comes from the Latin. Now some place an early kind of candle in ancient Egypt much earlier. This multi-purpose light stand I really like. It's very clever. It could hold a piece of wood, like a rush lamp on the top, but then it was also a candle holder. The candle was a self-contained small torch made with tallow or beeswax with that center wick. How sophisticated the early candle users must have felt. But though they burned for hours, the wicks needed trimming and sometimes relit, as most people's homes were drafty. The candle flame might gutter with excess tallow melting around the flame or down the sides of the candle. On a warm day, their candles grew soft and would bend. Candles were initially for the wealthy, sold by candle makers or chandlers. The phrase "to hold a candle to," like this person cannot hold a candle to that other person, that comes from an assistant or an apprentice holding a candle for the master while he or she worked. So the saying is kind of an insult, meaning one could not even do the lowliest task of serving that other person, much less being equal to them. Though I should say, in this painting, this saying would not be applicable because this shows Jesus apprenticing under his father Joseph. But the commoners and working classes would not be denied. They learned to make their own tallow candles from suet or tallow of oxen or sheep or some other animal fat. Young children were often used in the long, boring dipping of candles. Candle molds fashioned out of tin or pewter weren't invented until the 1400s in Paris. At night, make sure to store your candles in a candle box, probably mounted on the wall. This was to protect them from mice and other critters, and your dog would love an animal fat chew toy. Well-made candles burned so evenly they became even, for some, a means of measuring time. Notice this candle holder with hour increments. And candles themselves could be marked to indicate hours. Or a certain amount of oil used within an oil lamp marked time. Candle clocks were cherished, and with some a weight would fall free from the candle when burning onto a metal plate at certain increments, kind of a chime to mark the passing of time. The Anglo-Saxon King Alfred the Great used a candle clock that could span a 24-hour day and measured increments along the way. Candles also became symbolic. Advent candles were burned anticipating Christmas when the light of the world arrived. Candles were used in the Roman Catholic Church, in the Orthodox churches, and in Judaism to represent different spiritual truths like the ascending of prayer or the presence of God. Candles were lit upon fulfilling a vow or in gratitude for answered prayer, or candles were burned just to mark a festival or celebration. So the candle clearly had charmed many people with its ambiance in different ways. And artists were so numerous depicting people with candles, we could literally do a whole presentation on the candle in art. For most of history, the most expensive beeswax candles were for the wealthy. They didn't have that bad odor of animal fat candles, and they burned cleaner and longer, but they would still get soft in hot weather and could become brittle in the cold weather. The wealthy strategically placed mirrors in their rooms to reflect the candlelight. I love this painting around 1640 of the repentant Mary Magdalene reflecting on her old life and on her new life before a candle and a mirror. Yes, the mirror reflected light, but here it might also be a symbol of vanity, the skull on her lap pointing to mortality, and the candle perhaps signifying her spiritual enlightenment. That's just what art historians are guessing as to the intent. The artist also did two other similar paintings of Mary that I really like. This one has no mirror, and Mary is focused on that very large flame, which sheds a lot of light upon Mary's countenance. But notice the candle, or is it a candle? Notice the clear oil through most of this glass container reflecting the book beside it, and a large braided wick that is fed through this oil lamp in this glass. Now, that would burn a long time for Mary here. So the artist illustrates for us two popular home lights around 1640, a candle and a glass oil lamp. Now, this third painting of Mary by the same artist has the skull obscuring the light, but the skull reflecting in the mirror. This is kind of my favorite of these three paintings for its shadows and with a very realistically dim amount of light from one flame. Now, while we're speaking of candles for the wealthy, Louis XIV of France instructed his many servants at the Versailles Palace never to relight a candle, but to replace with a new one. Who could possibly be so wealthy? So the staff happily took them for home and also enjoyed a lucrative side job selling used royal candles. A second upscale candle besides beeswax came out in the 1700s. Spermaceti candles from the sperm whale, already caught for oil. It was the perfect candle, they thought. They burned evenly, and they didn't get soft as easily. They didn't smell, and they didn't make a lot of smoke. From the spermaceti candle came the brightness measure of 1 candle power. Early wattage. Notice the 18th century newspaper ads selling spermaceti candles. But again, many commoners could not afford candles like this, certainly, and so they made them. There's a lot of hot and smelly work to create 100 or 200 pounds of candles needed for the next year. Now, I've mentioned the odor of animal fat burning in candles, but some blended herbs or spices in the tallow to help. Yes, these were early scented candles, though our ancestors would be absolutely amazed at the modern Yankee candles and their more than 600 realistic scents, and how we use candles today, not so much for light, but ambiance and scent, or symbolism, as I said. I myself burn a large scented candle at my desk when I work at night. It's just very peaceful and very conducive for reflection and thinking. Now, up to now, we've focused on the fireplace, rushlights, fir candles, oil lamps, and candles. With this limited amount of light, it's very easy to understand how towns and villages, cities, followed the natural rhythm of the sun, as I've mentioned. Darkness brought an end to labor, and all people would be home with locked doors and windows. Church bells in the European Middle Ages sounded a curfew. The word curfew comes from the Old French and means cover fire. So be home and put your fire in overnight safe mode. Outer gates were shut to prevent thieves from sneaking in. Night watchmen made the rounds as a deterrent to crime, but also in case somebody's fireplace started a dangerous fire. They could sound the alarm for all hands to put out the fire. This submission to darkness was the accepted norm. From small villages to large cities, it had to be. Until a staggering new innovation for light beginning in the 1600s in Europe that could not only be safely used outdoors and indoors, but easily carried. Did you spot it? The lantern. Notice the night watchman here with his new amazing lantern in 1608. Now, the lantern encased oil lamps or candles with glass panes. The glass protected the flame from the breeze outside or a draft inside. The glass also protected from an unwanted fire spreading. And then there was this very popular style oil lamp, which became a favorite in the 19th century. Eventually, kerosene will also fuel these. We'll get there. Once the lantern was made, it wasn't long before city governments began placing lanterns on poles or hung them from buildings. Why, they are street lanterns. But why would they want street lights if the cultural norm was not to even be out then? The street light came to be in the larger cities because of expanding business. By the 1600s and through the 1700s, European and American cities were growing much larger with more commercial activity. Some businesses were working in the first few hours of darkness, especially in winter when darkness came earlier. For the first time in history, daylight was not sufficient for their jobs. To assist these workers walking home, many cities required people on the city streets to maintain a lamp outside their home during the first few hours after dark. So the first streetlights were maintained by homeowners, who mostly greatly resented this. The cost and time was just too much to ask. But soon enough, larger cities like Paris, London, Boston, New York, and Amsterdam installed iron lanterns around their main streets, paid by taxes, relieving homeowners of maintaining outside lights. Lamplighters, or lanterners, did their circuit, maintaining the fires and cleaning the glass. Benjamin Franklin invented a special oil lamp casing for the streets of Philadelphia that would not blacken the glass. Well, of course he did. But again, in the European and American villages and in small towns, life went on, as always, with darkness ending outdoor activities. But in the cities, service businesses realized that if workers walked the night streets, maybe they could sell them a meal or a drink. Or how about even an opera or theater performance? Retail shops along the streets upped their game with lit store displays for window shopping. City businesses extended their hours into evening, and so the street lantern helped create a new urban term, nightlife. Having streetlights in your city became a symbol of their modernity as well. But let's understand that streetlights were not that bright to our thinking. You might not even recognize someone you passed, but you could keep from walking into the ditch. And they deterred late-night crime some. Louis XIV increased the number of Parisian streetlights, and a 1669 commemorative medal was struck in his honor, boasting in Latin of security and brightness or luster that he brought to the city. The French woman holds the lantern while also safely holding her money purse. Some street lanterns were enhanced with polished reflectors, learning from those medieval mirrors and candles. Okay, let's take a break here. In our next lecture, we'll start the journey with the significant innovations in lighting after the year 1800, and we'll see a huge amount of large changes. Thanks very much. Take care.